On the evening of September 14th, 1940, the Germans successfully raided the Brighton Blitz for the first time, resulting in the dropping of 20 50-kilogram bombs across Edward Street and the Upper Rock Gardens area. A few months earlier, a man named Jack woke up to find that he had missed his morning alarm. Unfortunately, he had missed his 8 a.m. service at Holy Trinity Church. He had missed the last few weeks of service due to fatigue and a hip injury, and he had hoped to get to the morning service to avoid hymns, which he disliked. Later in the day, while hearing a boring sermon during the midday service, a brilliant idea pops into Jack's head. The idea involved him writing a book. The book would consist of letters from an elderly retired devil to a young devil who had just started work on his first patient. The book was later written and published, with 2,000 copies being sold out before copies had even landed on shelves. And by the time of Jack's death on the 22nd of November 1963, which is the same day President John F. Kennedy was assassinated, about 500,000 copies of the Screwtape letters had been sold. The book consists of letters from an elderly demon called Screwtape to his nephew Wormwood. Screwtape responds to letters he receives from Wormwood, although we never actually get to see Wormwood's own letters. In the letters, Screwtape provides advice on how Wormwood should tempt his patient. Now, I know religious skeptics might hear this and be reluctant to read the book for themselves, but you see, the contents of the letters contain knowledge that I believe everyone could benefit from. It might also interest you that C.S.Lewis was originally an atheist himself, but through discourse and debate with his best friend J.R.R. Tolkien, he converted to Christianity. From altruism to egoism, courage to cowardice, and assurance to anxiety, C.S. Lewis explores a wide range of conditions and inner states that humans experience daily, often without fully understanding what is happening both around us and within our own minds. Now, to be clear, the main goal of demons is not to harass or inflict despair on the human mind, but to eat them. By eat, I mean the eternal and constant consumption or torture of a soul's spiritual essence in their father's house, but they cannot do this anywhere else. Another thing I would like to add is the comment C.S. Lewis made in the preface of the book. He classifies people into two categories. One, being individuals who don't believe in demons, and two, being individuals who believe and are also obsessed with them. Some examples include witches and magicians. On that note, theists and anti-theists, let us delve into the letters.
You will say, these are very small sins, and doubtless, like all young tempters, you are anxious to be able to report spectacular wickedness. But do remember, the only thing that matters is the extent to which you separate the man from the enemy. It does not matter how small the sins are, provided that their cumulative effect is to edge the man away from the light and out into the nothing. Murder is no better than cards if cards can do the trick. Indeed, the safest road to hell is the gradual one, the gentle slope, soft underfoot, without sudden turnings, without milestones, without signposts.
It's 2026. Around the time of writing this essay, Trump and Putin are threatening to start World War III. The world's GDP is the highest it's been in history, which is weird considering the rates of poverty around the world. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. We live in an era defined by constant dopamine stimulation, and the devil takes advantage of this in 2026 through TikTok and social media. In 1942, he used newspapers, magazines, and social clubs. In the letters, Screwtape probably writes about distractions the most. Apparently, one of the best ways to lead a soul to hell is through day-to-day distraction. Screwtape emphasizes keeping the human mind in a state of constant comfort. An instance of this is seen in the example he gives of one of his former patients, whom he describes as an atheist. One day, while this man sat reading, Screwtape writes that he saw a train of thought in his patient's mind beginning to go in the wrong direction. About 20 or so years of work from Screwtape was about to collapse. The patient was probably having inner thoughts that would have brought him to the Christian faith. Now, in the letters, Screwtape highlights the stupidity of arguments. He states that arguments are in the court of the enemy. For instance, if God really did create the universe and all that lives in it, both material and immaterial, it would follow that logic and the observation of the world would be in his defense. So instead of inciting patients to partake in intellectual disputes, he either encourages them to fill their heads with all sorts of jargon, or he distracts them. Regarding the atheist in the example, Screwtape suggests that it was about time he had lunch, and with the randomness of life, other distractions followed, with the patient losing his train of thought. In that particular letter, Screwtape later states that the patient was safe in his father's house, otherwise known as hell. With jargon, people often repeat words they've heard within their ideological group without ever stopping to question whether the words or the arguments behind them actually make sense. At first, these words may have meant something different decades ago, but they may still carry the original meaning but are now used incorrectly, or attached to arguments that have since been abandoned by leading figures within that ideological group. This often causes disagreements with certain ideologies to feel immoral rather than merely incorrect, leading people to argue emotionally rather than rationally, and making them resistant to logical arguments that may be reasonable but threaten their worldview. Lewis argues that one of the best ways to negate the human conscience is not through lies specifically, but through jargon, through words that have been changed or used out of context to give the illusion of intellectual depth. In the letters, Screwtape highlights how practical this tactic is in causing their patients to avoid genuine conversations that would force them to defend their beliefs logically. Now, I'm not saying that demons are the reason people evade difficult questions or uncomfortable lines of thought. They could be, but that isn't the point. It is also important to note that Christians are not required to believe in demons to be Christian. Demons do not form any part of the creeds that summarize the Christian faith, at least not directly. A few years ago, for example, I did not believe in demons and still considered myself a Christian. What matters more is the pattern itself. The danger Lewis points to isn't the source of the thought, but the habit of avoiding it. So the next time you find yourself evading a question or shutting down a line of reasoning that challenges your beliefs, it's worth asking whether you're doing so because you genuinely examined it or simply because it made you uncomfortable.
He therefore, I believe, wants them to attend chiefly to two things, to eternity itself and to that point of time which they call the present. It is far better to make them live in the future. Biological necessity makes all their passions point in that direction already, so that thought about the future inflames hope and fear. It is unknown to them, so that in making them think about it, we make them think of unrealities. In a word, the future is of all things the thing least like eternity. It is the most completely temporal part of time. For the past is frozen and no longer flows, and the present is all lit up with eternal rays. But we want a man hag-ridden by the future, haunted by visions of an imminent heaven or hell upon earth.
Since we've covered distraction, we might as well talk about what we ought to do. In the letters, Screwtape talks about two types of focus. The first being external and the second being internal. His affinity towards both depends on what the patients are doing or thinking at a given moment. If a patient is praying, Screwtape tells Wormwood to sway the patient's focus to the external in such instances. In the event the patient is Christian and falls into temptation, Screwtape instructs Wormwood to keep his focus on the internal, letting the patient reflect on exactly what he has done and ponder it. Screwtape's genius is not in selecting internal or external focus, but in weaponizing either one when it keeps the patient away from responsibility, reality, or truth. He loves inward focus that leads to anxiety, outward focus that leads to distraction, and fixations on the past and future. When it comes to anxiety, Screwtape takes particular pride in it because he knows it rarely leads to genuine change. The more anxious a person becomes, the more fearful they grow. The more fearful they become, the more cowardly they act. Eventually, they begin to flee from truth and even from their own responsibilities. Addicts provide a clear example of this pattern. As the need for their fix intensifies, anxiety sets in. The greater the anxiety, the more desperate the behavior. And after repeating the cycle countless times, they are left more wretched than before, having changed nothing except the depth of their dependence. Anxiety can also come through our fixations on the past and future. Anxiety thrives where reality is absent. This is especially true when it comes to the future. The past, at least, is settled. It's already happened, which makes it real in a certain sense, even if the devil can still use it to stir regret or unrest. But the future? That's where Screwtape really wants our attention. Now, this doesn't mean we shouldn't plan for tomorrow. Planning is still something we do in the present. What Screwtape pushes instead is overthinking, replaying every possible outcome, wondering exactly what will happen, when it will happen, who will be involved, and whether it will all go terribly wrong or surprisingly well. He loves this habit because it doesn't just distract us from what's real, it slowly fills us with anxiety and despair. The present, on the other hand, makes Screwtape uneasy. He can certainly lead his patients into temptation in the present moment, but it's also the only place where they have a real chance to practice virtue. Temptation may happen now, but so does repentance, courage, and change. Virtue can only take place in the present. He says in one of his letters that biological necessity makes living things think about the present, but thoughts of the future inflame hope and fear. Sounds easy, but it's pretty hard to implement. The enemy, which is God and heaven, wants us to focus on the now, the present. He has given it to us in different sizes, so he wants us to make the best use of it. Whether it's internal monologues with him, or through practicing our responsibilities every day in a way that praises him, God is all about the present. So this is the formula. Good focus connects thoughts to reality, bad focus disconnects thoughts from action. I, for instance, fall into this slope all the time. I'm always in my own head, never actually doing what I want to do. But we can change that with me finishing this essay first. The last thing I would like to cover from the book is silence. Screwtape hates silence, and in some ways, so do I. I hate being bored, I like reading, I like watching movies, and I like to play video games. Now, there's obviously nothing inherently wrong with my hobbies or how we spend our free time, but when it comes to distractions, demons, as Lewis describes them, hate it when our minds are still. Not because they get bored, but because silence forces us to confront ourselves in ways we usually avoid. Ask an alcoholic what occupies their mind when they are sober. Often, they think about having a drink. Not because they enjoy the taste of the swill they ingest, but because facing themselves honestly is far more difficult than dwelling on distraction or fantasy. Screwtape insists that all addictions serve the purpose of his father, except addictions to the enemy. You see, any patient who is addicted to the enemy naturally tends to spend longer periods in silence and reflection than most people. This brings us to the topic of contemplation. In her magnum opus, The Interior Castle, Doctor and Saint of the Catholic Church, Teresa of Avila, talks about the prayer of silence. He says, I think I read somewhere that the soul is then like a tortoise or sea urchin, which retreats into itself. Those who said this no doubt understood what they were talking about, but these creatures can withdraw into themselves at will. While here it is not in our power to retire into ourselves, unless God gives us the grace. In my opinion, His Majesty only bestows this favor on those who have renounced the world. Contemplative prayer involves God involuntarily drawing the soul inward, closing the eyes and finding solitude without conscious effort. The mind becomes captive to God's presence. Remember what I said about Screwtape's dislike of certain addictions? He hates people who are truly addicted to God, because they might attain a level of prayer that shuts out all worldly distractions and makes temptation far more difficult. Outside the scope of the book, you see this in psychology. People hate prolonged boredom and silence. It's even been shown that people would be willing to administer electric shocks to themselves instead of spending time with their own thoughts. And the thing with silence or boredom is that if you simply embrace it, some of your best ideas might emerge from it. C.S.Lewis, for example, came up with the idea for the Screwtape letters while listening to a dull sermon. Similarly, Nikola Tesla often credited periods of solitary thoughts and visualization as crucial to his inventions. We as humans have a special ability in how we can immerse ourselves in our own thinking, yet we run away from it. Screwtape knows this. He does everything he can to keep us entertained or preoccupied, sometimes with things we don't even want to do. So the next time you find yourself bored, or maybe you planned an outing with friends only for them to ditch you, leaving you alone with your thoughts, resist the urge to watch a show, play a video game, or dive into something you might regret later. Instead, sit down and embrace the silence. Who knows, you might come up with a cure for cancer, or better yet, a cure for a terrible taste in friends.